a carnival comes to town. Now, every boy in Sweetwater gathered at that carnival. There were two things that they were interested in. First of all, there was a little mule there. You paid 10 cents to ride that mule, and if you could stay on him for 3 minutes, you got $10. But believe me, that little mule knew what he was doing, and nobody could stay on him for 3 minutes. The other thing was there was bare-knuckle fighting. Now, Lew was pretty good at that, and he decided that he'd take a chance because if you could stay 3 rounds with your opponent, you made $4. And if you defeated your opponent, you were able to take whatever purse had been collected to see the fights. So now if you can imagine, here's a 16-year-old boy. He's just a little taller than I am. He's a lanky boy. He's not skinny, but he's lanky. He's barefooted. His overalls are rolled up. He has no shirt on over his overalls, and they've wrapped his fists with tape. Now, the reason they wrap your fists with tape is not because they have any compassion for your opponent, but if you hit your opponent in the mouth, his teeth may cut your knuckles. So your fists are wrapped in tape. The referee is standing beside Lew Jenkins, his opponent, his arms around both boys. He says, now, boys, there's no kicking, no biting, and no eye gouging. And when the bell rings, come out swinging. Lew takes his corner, the bell rings, he rushes right across the ring, and he hits his opponent just as hard as he can with that good right hand, knocks him out. He has made $4 plus another $11 that they collected to see the fights. That's $15, which is a fortune. He takes this money home and gives it to his mother because there's never enough money to buy all the food they want. There's never a second helping. And he tosses and turns that night thinking about that fight. The next morning he's up and out of bed, and he goes to the wagon of the carnival manager, and he sits on the steps and waits for the man to get up. When he does, Lew approaches him and he says, now look, I know the blacksmith trade. I can pull my weight around the carnival, and I also would like to do some more fighting. Well, of course, the manager remembered him, and Lew got the job. Now, the next 2 years, Lew fought over 460 times, sometimes fighting 3, 4, and 5 times a night, never being defeated. But in 1930, the carnival goes broke. Lew Jenkins and his best friend there at the carnival, Billy Lemons, start riding the rails. They heard about the oil patch down in East Texas that Dad Joyner had brought in, and they thought maybe if we get down there, we could get on as an oil head. So they're riding the trains trying to get to East Texas, and they get thrown off the train in Dallas. Now there's a rain cloud coming up, and it's starting to rain. And fortunately, Billy Lemons is from Dallas, and he knows his way around, and he shows Lew how to hang on to the back end of one of those streetcars. And they ride up Pacific Street till they get to Baylor Hospital, and they get off. Because right there behind Baylor Hospital, there is a graveyard of deserted streetcars. You see, Dallas at that time in our history was changing from the mule-drawn streetcars to the electric. And all the mule-drawn cars were lined up there in this graveyard of streetcars. And indigent people are living in these streetcars, and they have pots of stew going and so forth. And the boys make their rounds, but nobody's got enough stew or any left over to feed them, so they go to bed hungry. The next morning they get up, and there's a little all-night diner there, and Lew and Billy Lemons go into the diner. Lew puts his last dime on the table. They get a cup of coffee and a donut, which they share. Then they start walking downtown Dallas looking for work. There's not any work available. They ask at several places. They're on their way back to the graveyard of streetcars on Elm Street, and they come to a building there. And outside the building, they see these fighters in their fighting pose. Lew says, let's go in there. Maybe I can pick up a fight and we can get enough to buy some supper. So they go inside, they go up a flight of stairs, they knock on a door, a voice from within says, come in. They open the door, and there's a fellow by the name of John Hall sitting there with his feet up on the desk reading a racing form, smoking a cigar. John Hall says, what can I do for you boys? Lew said, well, we saw your posters out there, said, I thought maybe I could pick up a fight so we could get enough to eat. John Hall looks at him and says, what do you weigh, kid? Lew says, I weigh 130 pounds. Hall flips through his books there and says, yeah, we can put you on tonight. There's a fight coming up your weight at 8:30. Now, what John Hall did not tell Lew Jenkins that he was going to be fighting the Texas lightweight champion. Well, the night came. Well, first of all, Lew and Billy Lemons slept on the training tables down there, tried to sleep. Lew said my stomach was hungry. I hadn't eaten in 3 days. It was aching, and said I was nervous about the fight. The training table was hard. Said I thought 8:30 would never come, but it finally did. And they led me into this arena indoors. I had never fought indoors before. The room was filled with smoke. The lights were bright. So I was disoriented, but they got me up there and they went through the routine of telling us about don't kick and don't bite and so forth. And the fight started. Lew said I was so weak and hungry I didn't know whether I was going to make it or not, but I just went out there and started swinging. Said when the first round was over, I was so tired I came over and I just laid down in my corner. Said they kicked me to get me up for the second round. I went out there and I swung and just did the best I could. Came back at the end of the second round. I put my arms around the referee and I said, look, I'm weak and tired. I haven't eaten in 3 days. I'm sick and I'm scared of that fellow over there and I want to quit. The referee pushed him back out into the ring and said, you're doing great, kid. Make it through this round and you get your $4. Lew went out there and he was swinging as hard as he could. He said the crowd was roaring. Said I didn't know what they were roaring about. Said I guess they always roar like that in Dallas when you fight. Said the fight was finally over and the referee took the both of us out to the middle of the ring and he held up my hand and announced that Lew Jenkins was winner by decision and the new Texas lightweight champion. Well, Lew got paid and he started winning fights. And he had quite a way with the girls. He wouldn't train. He was bad about drinking. He loved to play poker. And he was having this fight. The shrimp boat owners down in Corpus Christi had a kid they really liked named El Delgado, the cat. And they were going to arrange a fight between he and Lew Jenkins. And there was big money coming up from Corpus Christi. And the night of the fight, 3 men walked into Lew Jenkins' locker room. Joe and Sam Campisi and Nick Cassio, 3 Dallas gamblers. Nick Cassio was a spokesman, and he said, Lew, he said, the kid said, I'm going to show you how to make more money in one night than your old man ever made sharecropping all his life. And he explained to Lew that he wanted him to go down in the 3rd round to throw the fight. Lew didn't like it, but he thought about the amount of money they offered, and he said, well, that's a pretty good idea. I'll go along with it. So that's what happened. Now, the kid from Corpus Christi had a beautiful physique. He was very fast, but his punches were powder puff punches. So it's in the 3rd round, and Lew Jenkins has got him in a clinch. And he looks over, and Nick Cassio is giving him that down sign. But right behind Nick Cassio is a line of girls who always bet on Lew, and he knows they've got their rent money bet on him, and he just can't do it. So he stomps his opponent on the foot. The poor guy grabs for his foot. Lew turns around and smacks him and decks him, and he's out. Now Lew vaults over the ropes. He runs back down into his locker room. He grabs all his clothes out of his locker, and he goes outside and jumps on his Harley-Davidson motorcycle and roars off into the dark, because he knows those 3 gamblers will put out an eye, break his hands, break a leg, do something terrible to him, and he's not going to stay around to find out. He doesn't shut that motorcycle down until he gets to his mother's house in Sweetwater, Texas. He goes in, he spends the night with her. The next morning he sells the motorcycle, gives his mother the money, and joins the Army under a fictitious name. Now this is a great piece of Texas history, and I'm so glad to get it in this book. And if we don't have a film about this someday, I'm going to be disappointed. Anyway, here he is in the Army. Now the Army loves him, and they give him weekend passes and furloughs to have fights. And while he's in the Army, he has 14 professional fights which he wins 12 of them by knockouts, the other 2 by decisions, never defeated. Now, there was a tavern right across the street from the casino here called Ringside. And the reason they called it Ringside was because out back of the tavern in the shade of a giant oak tree was a boxing ring. Now, the reason for this was, you see, we had no TV and very few radios at that time. For entertainment, anytime there was any consternation in any of the customers of the tavern, they'd put boxing gloves on them, put them in the ring, and then you could bet on who's going to win the fight. So this was a source of entertainment. In fact, some people actually, as they're arguing, said, well, we'll settle this at ringside. So this was always something going on, and this particular day, they had booked a professional fight. There was a kid that was a pretty good fighter in Fort Worth, and they brought him over here, and they got him about with Lew Jenkins. Fred Browning was in the audience watching that fight. He liked what he saw. He approached Lew and he said, look, come up to the casino, let's eat a steak and drink some Scotch whiskey. I want you to meet my wife, Mary. So they did. Mary was impressed. He was a polite young man. And Fred Browning told him, he said, Lew, I like what I see and I would like to manage you. I'd like to be your manager. And do you have a manager? And Lew said, no, I have no manager, but I'm still in the Army. Now, I cut out an article that came out in the Dallas Times-Herald. And this article explains that Fred Browning bought Lew Jenkins' contract from the Army to get him out of the Army for $50. Now, we're in the depth of the Depression, and the Army would rather have that $50 than Lew Jenkins out there. They had to feed him and take care of him. So Lew is out of the Army. Now he explains to Mr. Browning, I've got a problem. He said, there are 3 Dallas gamblers who would like to put out my eye. Fred Browning said, who are they? He said, the Campisi brothers and Nick Cassio. Browning said, not to worry. He said, I got markers on all those bums. So Lew was off and running, and he got the nickname of the White Galahad here in Dallas, but he was never defeated. He fought Mexicans. Anybody would get into the ring with him, and he knocked most of them out. Now, in 1935, Fred McLemore wanted to build a sportatorium for the Centennial, which was coming up in 1936. And they wanted to have a big-name fight there, and everybody knew Lew Jenkins, and they wanted to get somebody to fight him. So they put the word out, but nobody will come to Dallas to take on an unknown kid. So Benny Bennion and Mayor Thornton and Fred McLemore are having lunch at the Blue Front Cafe. And Fred McLemore is explaining his problem. And Benny Bennion says, well, I'll put up a $2,500 purse, and Mayor Thornton said, I'll pay whoever's expenses comes down to fight him. So with that bait out there, we get a taker. His name is Chino Alvarez. He's the 4th-ranked contender. And this is big news for Dallas. He comes to Dallas, and the odds are 10-1 in favor of Chino Alvarez. Fred Browning, right here in this casino, told his broker, said, find out how much money they got and cover it all. The fight started, and it lasted 23 seconds. Lew Jenkins hit Chino Alvarez 3 times. I've got a picture that came out of the Times-Herald. Chino Alvarez is sinking. His knees are buckling. Lew's about to hit him again. He's over in the corner of the ring. Now, as a result of this, Lew Jenkins is now able to get fights. His next fight is in Chicago. He's going to fight a boy called Butcher Boy. Before the fight starts, 2 men come into his dressing room and they say, Mr. Jenkins, we want to advise you to not show up. He said, Butcher Boy is a sadistic person. He likes to hurt people. He'll cut you up very badly. Well, Lew Jenkins is from West Texas and talks cheap. He doesn't pay a lot of attention to these guys. The fight starts, and the Butcher Boy is knocked out the 2nd round. Now, this goes on, and each time, incidentally, the fight with the Butcher Boy, the odds are 8-1 in favor of him. Fred Browning says, find out how much money they got and cover it all. This goes on until 1939. Lew Jenkins is fighting for the World Championship. He's fighting a fellow by the name of Lew Ambers, who's had 196 professional fights. He's never been knocked off his feet. He's won 83 of his fights by knockouts. The odds are 5-1 in favor of the champ. Fred Browning right here at the top of the Hill Casino says find out how much money they got and cover it all. Now, Lew Ambers, the champ, has never been knocked down, but when the fight starts in the first round, Lew Jenkins knocks the champ down 5 times. The champ comes back to his 8th corner and shakes his head. His manager and second tell him, look, we don't know how this kid's doing this, but you go out this round and just stay away from him, and we'll have a strategy for you when you come back. So the champ goes out there and he gets on his bicycle and he's staying away from Lew Jenkins, but he gets knocked down 3 times. He comes back to his corner. The ring doctor comes in, takes a look at his face, which looks like hammered hamburger with blood coming out of it, stops the fight. The fight's over, and Lew Jenkins, 2 months before his 24th birthday, is the world's lightweight champion. Now, he immediately challenges the next weight up, the welterweight, and defeats him. This is a great Texas story, never been published anywhere else except in your Top of the Hill book, because Fred Browning adopted him, more or less, and made over $1 million always betting on his boy and taking the odds. Great Texas story. And incidentally, I got a phone call from California, and his son, Lew Jenkins' son, bought one of these books.